Welcome. Well, we're finally getting to our English language Israel Today podcast, video podcasts, and we're going to start off with the biggest topic in Israel today, very understandably so, whether or not Trump is going to attack Iran and we are going to be pulled into another war. It's been striking to watch the Israeli news lately. There are, of course, a lot of Iranian Jews who live in Israel today. And there's a large segment of the Iranian population that is still friendly towards Israel. So it's not difficult for Israeli media to connect with people in Iran and get testimonies from what is going on today, right now. And so watching Channel 12, for instance, over the past couple of days, they've spoken to people on the ground there. And they're begging. The people in Iran are begging for Israel to do something, to even to attack their country. They're saying, attack now, please. Because without some kind of intervention from outside, this uprising is going to fail.
And then they'll be asking themselves whether thousands have already been killed just for nothing, and they'll have to wait another few years till the pot boils even further. But I understand the economic crisis there is really driving things also very steeply. They've had crazy inflation on top of the sanctions that have been, I guess, in effect for on and off for over a decade now, yeah?
Yeah, and listening to a history podcast that I was on a couple of days ago, it was interesting to hear, when the Ayatollahs took over, they're almost kind of an anarchist movement, this Ayatollah sect. And so they weren't at all prepared to take over governance of a nation, especially a large nation with vast natural resources like Iran. And so it's kind of understandable, 30, 40 years into this project that economically it's falling apart.
Right. This is 1979, 78, 79, right. Something like that. Yeah, I just, as reflecting on this whole last year, it's hard to believe that 7 months ago, we were kind of at, quote, D-Day, and, we, of course, weren't privy to it, but the government cabinet was sitting there and making the decision. They said, it's now or never. This is the best shot we'll have. And from what I understand, they literally had to say, we'll probably lose a few thousand lives to ballistic missiles from Iran, but somehow they made the decision to do it. And even though about 30 Israelis died from the missiles here, you would have to look at that as kind of a biblical level miracle and victory.
The statistics all across the 12-day war are so surprising as to be miraculous. How did more missiles not get through? They fired a lot. How did more Israelis not die on the ground here? Those missiles are huge. When they hit a building, you would expect dozens of casualties, not a handful. How did we not lose one pilot in the course of hundreds and hundreds of sorties over an enemy nation well over 1,000 kilometers away?
Yeah, I have an acquaintance that's in the Air Force, and he, fairly senior, and he said the same thing, it's not reasonable, the level of success and lack of malfunctions in all the systems that were required for that. I want to maybe ask if we can just kind of zoom back, 7 months ago, like I said, I feel like I haven't even really internalized what actually happened in the last 2 years, much less those 12 days. And as an aside, I have a bomb shelter in my house that has this thick reinforced concrete, all around, and a blast door. You have one where you live?
Yeah.
So I was and we had already experienced dozens of air raid sirens from missiles coming in from Lebanon. So I was feeling pretty safe and secure because...
Right, no problem. You've been through this.
Yeah. After the fact, only after those 12 days that I actually kind of go on the internet and understand what a ballistic missile from Iran means in terms of how big it is, how much energy, how much... It flies at 5 times the speed of sound. So instead of taking a fast commercial jet plane might take, I think, 2 hours or so to get between Israel and the area of Iran back in the day when there was flights. And this goes just a couple minutes. I think 12 minutes is what. So these things are going so fast, so big that just the kinetic energy, even without the explosion, did crazy things. I have a friend that was there in the forces that were kind of digging through the rubble to find bodies. And you look at the pictures, like concrete block walls were blown out, 100 meters or 100 yards away from the strike, just from the blast of the air, without, not because of shrapnel or something like this. So like in my little bomb shelter, I'll try to keep quiet and not tell everyone around me, although hopefully there's a few people listening now, but our bomb shelters are not so much help for that kind of...
a direct strike,
yeah.
The bomb shelter is not going to do much to help you.
But since everyone was obeying and was in their things, I think if everyone had been in their living rooms, then instead of 30 casualties or deaths, it would have been much longer,
absolutely.
Larger.
Yeah, and I think in these types of cases, the bomb shelters, of course, are to protect us more from falling shrapnel. If your building or your home, God forbid, takes a direct hit, the bomb shelter is not going to do much. Which I think is why Netanyahu has pointed out several times.
From Lebanon, I thought it would, but I could be wrong on that too.
Yeah. But I think, this highlights why Netanyahu has pointed out a few times now over the course of the past year or so that it's not only Iran's nuclear program that is an existential threat to Israel, it's the 20,000 ballistic missiles. They have no other reason to build that many of them other than to fulfill their stated goal of destroying Israel.
Right.
So to allow them to have that kind of weapon in their hands, to possess that kind of weapon, is an existential threat. It has to be taken care of, no less so than the nuclear threat.
So the reports I saw said that there's still an estimated 2,000 or so missiles like that,
right.
Even after everything that Israel and the U.S. did to try to cripple the Iranian military force. So, as we're broadcasting, we're kind of teetering every day. Is it going to be now? Is it going to be in a few days? Is it going to be canceled? What's the big geopolitical factors that Trump, assuming he's the main one deciding, will take into account. But with those 2,000 missiles...
And you have to wonder, what is the trigger? What is the thing that's going to cause either Trump or Israel or the Iranians from their side to do something that's going to lead to this attack or this conflagration? I guess it's not the number of protesters killed, because if the sources on the ground in Iran are giving an accurate picture, 30,000 dead already. How many more need to die before that's the trigger?
Right. From what I read recently in 1979, when the Shah kind of capitulated, the demonstrations and the numbers of people killed was much lower.
Right.
And there was not nearly this kind of economic pressure. There's many hours during the day that there's no water in the tap in Iranian water system.
Right.
As a water engineer, that was interesting for me to read. And actually, before 1979, there was strong connections between Israel and Iran. They were almost partners or allies.
Right.
And so Israel was doing a lot of projects of water supply in Iran, even though it's a vast, huge country. The amount of rainfall in most of the country is very small. I looked it up, and it was like half of Israel, which is also small.
The average rainfall in most areas of Iran is half of what it is
it's a
on average
huge
in Israel.
Mountainous country, but not that much rainfall.
And we have a problem with water
in the center. Yeah. So, and I do recall that Netanyahu was offering,
right? Yeah, he did a little propaganda video a year ago or so,
and maybe there's something to that.
Yeah. And for sure, Israel could help them. I think we've helped other countries in Africa as well with similar problems.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about water in a separate segment, but
look, across many fronts, Israel, of course, can offer a lot of assistance to Iran, and there's a lot of ways that the two countries can, and no doubt will, partner once all of this is over.
I like your certainty.
And that's the way it was in the past. And I think that Iranian people...
that we're really over this. When you have a tyrannical kind of quasi, very strange, spiritual-powered regime on top of everyone's self-interest to remain in control.
Right.
I don't think it's a complete done deal yet. How we're getting out of this.
But I think we've passed the point of no return. I don't think things can go back to how they were 5 years ago after where we've gotten now. On their side at least, things will just never go back to. They've killed 30,000 of their people. And like you were saying, in 1979, all it took were a few hundred deaths for everyone to paint the Shah and his regime as an evil that had to be removed.
And the people painting are the people who today are killing tens of thousands.
Exactly.
It was like the tables reversed. From the reports I heard, the Iranians on the ground were like, we trust Netanyahu more than we trust Trump, and we saw like the surgical strikes that the IDF did to avoid any civilian casualties and only hit the Revolutionary Guard military assets. So apparently a big part of the population there is pretty pro-Israel, which brings me to another thing. We've had some articles in the past by Iranian-born people who were Muslim and kind of became disillusioned with Iran, with the Ayatollahs, and with Islam, and became Christians. Marzia, probably not saying her name right, but we've had interviewed her once and had some. So the whole aspect of how the turning of maybe millions of Muslims in Iran to faith in Jesus, how that's affected the population, how that it's also a huge question for me.
That is a very interesting question, and I'm sure there's some impact it is having on what's going on the ground. There's absolutely no way to find out right now, of course, but one day soon we'll know, and that will be an interesting thing to dig into.
I have a brother-in-law whose parents were born in, or at least one of his parents in Iran, Persian Jews, and I just saw them recently, and like they're kind of excited that maybe this turnaround will happen. They were actually considering moving back to Iran just before the revolution happened.
Okay.
That they didn't got stuck there.
But you meant now they're thinking about moving back if things change.
40-something years ago, 1977 or 78. I wanted to also add, we're talking about how this is kind of a biblical level of events that we've been seeing the last 2 years, and particularly 7 months ago, very reminiscent of the end of the Book of Esther in the Bible, in which there was also a genocide that was planned against the Jewish people. And through a series of, again, miracles, the situation turned completely. And kind of the key verse at the end of Esther, it's Esther 9, I believe. Esther 9, 20 to 22, and Mordecai, who was elevated to be like a prime minister at that time, kind of commemorated this incredible turnaround, this incredible revolution or uprising or overturning. It's really overturning in the Hebrew. It says, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. And so this is the first, we're coming up on the first Purim celebration of that event. And what a great thing to remember. Like the horrible situation suddenly was like turned over. Instead of thousands of dead here, almost none. There's also another verse, I believe, in Psalms, mourning into dancing. It's also a modern Hebrew popular song by a guy named Yishai Ribo. Rakata yachol ha'afoch mispadi lemachol. So it's an incredible time to be living in.
No, I think we've seen over the past 2 years, one of the big lessons has been that things can change very, very suddenly in a totally opposite direction. And, may that happen soon with Iran. One of our Christian writers who you pointed out has written a couple of times in her articles, the passage and the reference escapes me at the moment, but where the Bible speaks about, God speaks about Elam, which of course today is a province of Iran, but, biblically stands for the entirety of Persia, that God will break the power of Elam and establish his throne there, which is an interesting kind of thing to dig into on its own.
I've heard several Persian background people mentioning that thing.
But so obviously, that the hope of that biblical passage is on their minds at the moment.
Pray for without the Israeli connection and how they've been harassing us and wanting to kill us, for all those millions of people who have been suffering under that regime.
Amen.
Amen.